Samar, I'm unable to hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Perfect. Thank you so much. Good evening and greetings, everybody. Happy International Literacy Day. My name is Samar Afzal, living and working in Paris, and I've been part of the ANTS production very recently, and I'm really looking forward to all the sessions to be moderated here. The ANTS production is basically an initiative by two young, energetic people, mainly focusing on just one thing, to bring smile to everyone's face with the help of some real-time stories, some inspirational events of different people around us, and just to join their objective, I was really happy to be a part of this. And today, just as a part of the same cause and objective, we are going to hold a session with two guest speakers of ours. I will be introducing them one by one here. But today is just to give you a quick background of why exactly are we here today. As it's International Literacy Day, we will be talking a little more about the literacy, the experience our experts have on that. How does it really differ in terms of the theoretical literacy and the practical one, and much more. So today's first speaker is, the guest speaker is Sabah Haji, who is an educationist, who is a trustee for Haji Education Foundation. Leaving her corporate job behind, she decided that she wants to serve the community. And I'm sure you all, most of you know how she has been contributing to it. Living in the mountains, she has given incredible opportunities and platform to the young kids over there. And I mean, I've been witness to all the online content which I see, which Sabah has been sharing, and many more people, and it's inspirational. I would highly recommend to go to her page of the school and understand a little more. The other speaker we have today is Gabriela Olive, who is the director of Women Lead Movement, and other than that, well, that's an NGO which basically works on the gender equality and literacy. Other than that as well, she has many other accolades, and she has decided to be a part of this NGO and contribute to the society by bringing more awareness and really helping the community in whichever way possible. So welcome, Sabah. Welcome, Gabriela. I'm really honored to speak to you guys today on a very, I would say, it's a very vast topic. Literacy is super vast, and there are so many things attached to it. So mainly, we will be talking about how has been your experience as a whole, what really, made you contribute to the community, and what were the gaps and loopholes which you were able to see, and you felt, kind of encouraged and thought that, yes, let's do that. But in addition to that, I would also want to talk a little more about with you in terms of the discrimination, or how the society really perceives or interprets the initiatives around that. So first of all, just to have a little warm up about the subject, Sabah, what is literacy to you?
Literacy would be, it's the door to access, equality. It's the only way to bring everyone on par. To give everybody opportunities, because there is a very heavy skew towards privilege, where the privileged do get everything, and the majority of the world don't even have access to that. Literacy education is a very real platform to equalize things, to give opportunities to the masses who do not have the opportunity so far. Literally anyone can rise up on their own merit and achieve things with a little push, a little help, because the privileged few have been bagging, including myself. We have bagged all the resources in the world, not just education, and education is the step to take us to everything that we need, at least by this day and age.
Right. So I think I know that you live in the mountains, really, and it's extremely beautiful where you live. And I know that there are a lot of people coming from different corners of the world, probably, who decide to volunteer for your school, and how you contribute with the help of that volunteership as well. What made you really go back to the mountains and start something like this? What really triggered your emotions over there?
So I belong to the Doda district, which is high up in the Jammu and Kashmir mountains. Where it's about my village is at 7,500, 8,000 feet up in the Himalayas. This is the village my father was born, and since last year, just the year before that, we did not have a road connectivity. Actually, final roads early this year, so it was all up on horseback and unconnected. A lot of villages over here in this part of the world. Uh, Geography is so remote that forget education, even the other basics were not in place or still are not in place, health, infrastructure, and so on. Anyway, the backstory is my father was born in Rethink. He grew up and was one of the only was from here to get an education, which is what helped him step out of the village. My grandfather before him was the only person, probably the entire district to get an education. That's how they made way up. And my father is very closely connected to the village. So growing up, every summer vacation, he would make sure to bring us. We grew up in Dubai. I grew up in Dubai and studied there. Every summer, it would be the best time of our year would be to come up here for a month because it was completely cut off from the rest of the world. We had to get on horses for 4 hours to reach up. So it was our big summer adventure, and we were very tied in from childhood to this village. And growing up, I noticed very starkly because we got a very good education in the Dubai schools. My cousins here, my friends here of the same age, that just because they didn't have the or even they didn't have a good schooling, the way it affected their personality, their confidence by talking to us. These are things that were very obvious to me growing up, and later on in life, as I was working in the city, 2008, my parents said, why don't you come back? Or I decided to move back from Bangalore to come and help our family trust over here. And we decided to take the step of, listen, let's leave everything else and let's focus on the village and let's one thing that can really change, um, you know, change things in the future, which is to educate children and at a good quality. Not just in an okay school and let someone else run. So my mother and I stay in the village. My father, anyway, he loves being in the village. So we quit everything, came back here. And our family school under the trust, which, I'm a trustee of, the trustees of. And we have been here every day since then. And we built up the school brick by brick. We, it was in our home, in our cottage. We didn't have a building when we started. So 2 rooms downstairs were the first classrooms. And then eventually we built a couple of rooms. And, and just and today we are at we have a very, very good track record and actually, it just the reason I'm here is purely luck. I don't know how I moved back, and I never envisioned that I would be a teacher and in education for the rest of my life. But it's been very satisfying because it's a lot, and we have seen, a graph that shows how much the improvement has affected the whole community and given back to the village, and that's special.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Sabha. I think that's extremely inspirational. And I think when you say that, the horse rides and, crossing the place for 4 hours, it might be a privilege to us. And sadly, for some people, that's the way of living. And we will get back to that as well. Gabriela, welcome. I was just asking about the definition of literacy, because often we all have very different interpretations of literacy and education. So you both coming from the field, experiencing day in, day out about how people really perceive such things and whether illiteracy is really important for the society, whether people interpret it in the right way, whether they think it's just, reading books and just qualifying exams, or else they're really getting something out of it. What do you think literacy is to you?
Thank you so much for having me. And let me first start by saying Happy International Literacy Day to everyone and our online audience as well. I guess for me, literacy generally means not only, like you said, not only the ability to read books and to write, but literacy is actually capacitating oneself with self-development skills, with cognitive abilities to make very critical and responsible decisions as well. And in order to advance your personal development, you actually do need to have literacy skills. And literacy skills enables one to be able to read prescription pill labels, road signs, be able to read a book, be able to read manual instructions, be able to even vote at a ballot box, be able to tick and participate actively in democratic processes. So literacy is so fundamental for our own human development. Without literacy skills, we would be in serious trouble because according to statistics, over 750 million adults cannot read or write. And that is not only a small fraction of people. Imagine 750 million adults walking around on earth in modern day life unable to read or write. They are not only destructive to the broader society, but actually to themselves. And that is why I appreciate the fact that we have these types of platforms and these types of programs that promotes and observes Literacy Day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think, Gabriela, that's a great point. And when you say 750 million adults, it means that there's still a lot to do, right? But definitely it starts from something which is around us. I'm curious to know a little more about the experience you both had when you know, decided to do something for the community. What sort of resistance did you really see from the society, and what sort of mindset did you actually come across of people? I mean, you had to motivate them, you had to convince them that why is it important. So, if you can share a little bit of experience, around that, Sabah.
Okay, I think,
Yeah, sure.
okay, can I
Sure.
go first? Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
absolutely.
So, I'm from a country, it's called South Africa, and South Africa has one of the lowest literacy rates in the world. And part of the reason why we are experiencing very lowered literacy rates in South Africa is because we have a really poor educational system. We have an educational system in our country that doesn't promote a culture of reading, right? We have really under-resourced facilities in our countries, particularly the public school system. And we've got a two-tiered system in South Africa, two-tiered educational system, which is private education, which is normally well-resourced, has the best facilities, textbooks arrive on time. And on the other hand, you have your public education system where textbooks do not arrive on time or even at all. We've got still mud schools, we've got incompetent or rather ill-equipped educators who are not able to communicate with learners in the way that they need to teach and learn and teach the learners. We also have poverty. Poverty is a major barrier when it comes to accessing quality education in South Africa. And part of the reason why we find that we have increased dropout rates in our country, it's also the fact that COVID-19, the pandemic, has exacerbated our circumstances in our country. School kids are dropping out. They are finding other means to find employment in the informal sector because they believe that making money or working or earning minimum wage is way better than being at school. And I don't blame learners in South Africa for not wanting to go to school because education needs to be made fashionable, You need to encourage and promote, especially our government. Our government needs to promote education and make it popular amongst young people and teach them, not only teach them, but make awareness that without education, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to compete in the economy. First of all, it will also be very difficult for you to identify when you are in danger as well, and especially when you were a young girl, you were a young woman, you need to be able to understand certain attitudes and behaviors, particularly where GBV is concerned, right? Because when you're educated, when you're literate, you're able to identify certain behaviors and attitudes. You're able to develop a voice. You're also able to develop leadership because, and that's why we also need to promote girls, particularly girls need to go to school because school enables the environment for young girls to participate and to take on their first leadership roles at school, to learn and develop and cultivate a voice of reason for themselves. So that is some of the experiences that we have here in South Africa. We have, there's a need for a reading culture to be cultivated in our country right now. Um, Most kids, they do not want to read. They cannot read with understanding, and that is very alarming. Teenage pregnancy plays also a major factor on why girls are not going to school as well. But most importantly, it is the really poor quality of education in South Africa, and there needs to be emphasis placed on curriculum development. We need a curriculum that speaks directly to the needs of our society. We have GBV issues in our country. We've got femicide issues in our country. We've got drug issues in our society. We've got all sorts of very very difficult and sensitive issues that we are experiencing, not only exclusively in South Africa, but even globally as well, because an uneducated girl or an illiterate girl is very vulnerable to challenges of the world, particularly GBV, particularly child marriages as well, and the inability to make responsible decisions as citizens. So we need to launch libraries in every community in South Africa. We need to promote education, whether it's through social media, whether it's through physical contact and doing door to door and, just promoting education and the benefits of education, because education is very beneficial. We must never ever take that thinking that reading a book is it's difficult or reading a book is so boring. There's that idea that education is boring, but actually reading actually capacitates you to reason, to rationale, to make decisions for yourself and to make responsible decisions for those around you as well.
Thank you so much, Gabriela. I think that raises a very interesting point of, spreading that awareness among both the genders, especially women as well. Somewhere we definitely see that lag when it comes to women coming forward and, pursuing that education. Sabah, I'm sure you have some interesting experiences as well from the field, because the place where you come from, and I'm also even more curious about Jammu and Kashmir because I come from that place, and I belong to Tral, which is definitely a very literate, I would say, village of Kashmir. But then still, there are these, kind of pushbacks. There are these resistances happening either from the society or sometimes amongst the youngsters that this is of no use. And when Gabriela mentioned that youngsters are trying to look for some new forms of source of income, that's ruins the whole game. We are trying to spread the awareness of literacy, but then when they look at money, they want to be into that game as soon as possible. So how has it been for you when it came to pulling those kids out of their houses and convincing them that come to school and just let's learn together?
Well, I was not
Sorry, for some reason, Sabah, I think your voice is cracking. I'm not sure if Gabriela can hear you well and the audience.
I'm okay.
Yes, it's a bit fading, but let's try it one more time.
So I was saying I was not in.
Sabah, I think there are some audio issues. Is it possible to have a headphone or something so that your mic is probably near you?
Okay.
Awesome. Perfect. Let's wait till then. But in addition to that, Gabriela, so till the time Saba comes back, I have one more question related to the same thing. So when it comes to COVID, because the pandemic changed so much for us, everything is going online, everything is becoming digital, and right from I don't know, my friend recently told me that she's learning singing online, and I that was so new to me, especially in India. She's living in Hyderabad, and she said because of so many things happening around, I wanted to have something therapeutic, and I decided to learn singing online. So that was absolutely new to me when it comes to a South Asian country. So this has become the new norm. And when it comes to digitalizing everything around you, even the tuition classes, even the school classes have been shifted to the internet. But let's be honest and let's face the reality. I mean, to be on the practical side, South Asian countries, or let's say Africa, I'm not really sure. Maybe you can share the statistics about the African culture or the setup really. But I know this for sure that in South Asian countries, not everyone has got the internet to learn things, right? Um, People come from extremely poor families as well, and they have to do everything to get a mobile for their kids so that they can attend the classes or maybe a laptop or the internet, and it is not cheap, right? How have you come across anything of that sort, and if yes, how exactly are you planning to address that challenge in your society?
Thank you so much for that question. That is such an important question to ask. And just like South Asian countries, we are experiencing the same in Africa, perhaps even worse, whereby we have school kids who do not have access to the basic material. I'm talking about textbooks, pencils, school bags, school uniforms, school shoes, let alone internet and tablets and computers and all those other technical facilities and resources that is so much needed and critical for active learning as well. And to add on to COVID, it has exacerbated our circumstances. It has, in fact, had a very negative impact on school learners' attitude towards school. And to an extent, I understood that electronic learning was needed under the circumstances that we were operating under during the pandemic period. But the challenges that we faced was that not everyone in the communities, especially in the local schools, had access to internet. Wi-Fi connection was very bad. Most kids didn't even have access to data, something as simple as data. And those are just a few of the barriers that interfered with the learning of school learners as well in South Africa, as well as not being able to afford the basic food, meals, because you cannot actively participate in education if you're not fed as well. Food security played a very critical role due to the pandemic and ensuring that e-learning is successful. The other factors that was hindering school kids in South Africa with e-learning is the fact that they didn't always have the space and the privacy to participate in electronic learning as well. They didn't have privacy at home. Most of especially in poverty-stricken communities, you'll find that most households were overpopulated, communities were densely overpopulated, very poor connection, inability to afford airtime or data bundles to access study materials online as well. And it was also inclusive of a number of structural factors as well that interfered with their
So are
ability to
you
access
is your
e-learning.
right. So is your NGO planning to address it in nearby future? Because I feel you guys have the data wherein you're able to see that fall of numbers in terms of people coming to learn, right? Are you guys planning anything? What are the measures?
You know, in all honesty, that is one of the issues that our government is actually battling right now with, is how to make education more accessible, particularly electronic learning, right? Because right now our government is struggling to pull in the funds to make electronic learning a success, to ensure that every kid has a laptop, that every kid has access to a nearest library, to make sure every kid has a meal to enjoy at school. And of course, that would require a substantive budget from government to ensure a successful implementation. But that's one of the issues that we are facing in South Africa, is that we are struggling with tax deficit in our country as well. And for sure, we received some help from the IMF as well. But the issue with accepting loans from the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank is that it comes with a lot of conditions for the South African society. I'm talking about fiscal policies that is not beneficial for the welfare of society, and having that same society and citizens having to pay tax revenue to pay off loans as well to the IMF. And that makes it really difficult for our government to execute successfully social programs, and that includes educational programs as well. So we find ourselves in a quagmire of some sort. It's really difficult, and I think in this instance, how we are going to address it, or one of the forms that we can address it, is having to fundraise. And I don't think general taxation is one of the best forms for fundraising for government, even though I do believe our government over relies on general taxation. But I would then suggest that there needs to be some form of international fundraising method. They need to look for international donors and connect with other governments and across the world that shares common values as us, that shares common values that includes inclusive education, education for all, not only education for a selected few or privilege, but actually education for each and every child, because literacy skills is so fundamental. It's like we said earlier on, you need it for human development. We can't abandon the idea or abandon the principle of education for all and promote rather education for a selected few, whether it's on the basis of an academic criteria, that type of thing. So we don't want to abandon the principle of education for all. We need education for every kid, regardless of the academic abilities, regardless of the academic performance. We need to provide the material support, and I think that is what our government needs to address, how they are going to pull in the funds to address the academic material conditions, because we're also living in modern society and things are changing very fast, so we need a government that is up to date, that's up to speed with, and with the changes of the world. So if I were to recommend, yes ma'am?
Sorry, please go ahead.
Okay, I'll finish off. If I had to recommend ways for our government to provide support in addressing these issues, it would be definitely major investment. Not only our government, but world leaders need to come together as a collective and address these issues and invest in education, particularly education for girls, because girls and women are always at the receiving end when it comes to structural challenges. And we need girls to go to school so that they can be policymakers, so that they can think for themselves as well, so that they can be independent, so that they can actively participate in the economy, so that they can even think of ways to create climate-friendly businesses as well, because the just transition is such an important theme and topic that we need to also address. The just transition, meaning justice in terms of making the shift and change from whether it's burning coals over to, more environmental friendly circumstances, without having to retrench workers, in their masses, because in as much as we need to convert over to the just transition, we also need to protect workers' rights as well. And the majority of the labor force is a makeup of women. So women need to be
Yeah,
protected under these
absolutely.
circumstances.
And I mean, Vishnu has mentioned in the comments that, you know, this discussion actually reminds us how privileged we are because we don't have to fight for education. The country where I live in, it's not at all a discussion. It's just a neutral, a by default thing for any gender to just have education. And the surprising part of this country is that people prefer sending kids to the government school because they are more privileged, there are more facilities, and it's cheaper. And on top of it, they have the best teachers to learn from, right? So I mean, it really pushes me to think really deep about it. That when you mentioned that fundraising or maybe a global vision, global leaders need to come together to really think about educating and, you know, bringing that literacy concept to the far-flung areas of the world. But the problem is that we are actually having two battles over here. One is convincing the societal on the societal level that, hey, literacy or education is important, so you've got to come out and, you know, grab that. And on the other side, we can only wish and pray for that the global leaders start prioritizing education more than anything else in the world. But going back to Sabha, I'm glad you're back, and I hope your mic is all good now. Sabha, I was just talking to you about your experience when it came to introducing the concept of bringing a new school, or maybe how was your experience as a whole? Was it gender related? Was there any sort of hesitation between the families that no, we do not want our kids to have this particular education? Usually I've seen in the rural areas, sometimes people actually think that people if kids are getting more education, they will be really independent, and that is taken as a curse somewhere. And I was quite surprised at some of such opinions. So share your experience, please.
If you can just check whether I'm okay on the audio.
All good.
Yeah, all right. Okay. Right. So my experiences over the past 13 years that I've been here now, a lot of it resonated with what Gabriella picked up on, which is, you know, the education system as it is built into, let's say, the Indian subcontinent, India, Pakistan. It is horrifying, quite frankly, right? It is because there are government schools. The last mile reach is the government schools, the public education system, and they have the most highest paid teachers are your public school teachers, but they're not teaching. They're just not. You have the highest qualified, best paid teachers in every corner and every assigned to every corner and remote village. But then look at the generations of kids who are uneducated coming out of schools. Of course, everyone has a pass certificate. That's how our system is. So these are things that over the years just increasingly shocked and horrified me, and it hasn't stopped so far. When we started, this was the starting point that, you know, there were two generations of kids who had not been educated. So my peers, my cousins, and so on, who I grew up with, it was now their kids who were in school when I came back to the village, and rather than the other way around, which is there was opposition to it. I could sense that the villagers were hungry that their kids get educated. And this is something across Jammu and Kashmir I've seen. Parents are really hungry that their kids get educated. And I suppose it's true of every part of the world, because in this day and age, people have realized that this is the stepping stone. This could be the area to access and get on par with, or a foot in the door to get out and do better. So we actually were, you know, we were planning to take it slow and start the next academic year, but it was the village that pushed us. They said, we will build the school, you just start off, please, you know, enroll our kids. A very supportive community. There were the societal problems that we are still battling today. You know, there is gender bias. There is, they do hold back girls as much as they can. If they you know, they would rather send their boy to get educated than the girl. But then we made it a policy, because my mother and I run the school. We are strong women. We said, look, do you have a sister at home? Yes. Why isn't she at school? If you're not enrolling your sister, then we might not take your brother in, which, you know, let them bring their girls in. And generally, when we have two or three kids enrolled, if one of them is a girl student, we you know, we keep them free of charge. So that's like an incentive. Okay, your girl studies free of charge, just let her come to school. Those are the small things that we could do. the starting point for us also was my father is the sarpanch of the village. He's an elder of the village, so our family has some standing. There's a trust already built in. If I had to go to a new village and start it, that would have been a different issue. This is our village, everyone knows us and our families, so the trust level was very high, and you need that in a school. From day one, we had parents coming in to actually watch classes because they'd never seen their kids being educated, regular classes, hour one, hour two. So they would stand outside the window and see, wait 2 3 hours and then take their kids home. And over the years, they know the kind of standard. We've kept the standard high. So what I did not want to do was, do like a patronizing behavior. We'll start a small school and then leave and come back once in a year. We stayed here. My mom and I teach regularly, day in and day out. We supervise, we train our teachers. We expect the best from our teachers. And I honestly believe that more than buildings and infrastructure, if your teachers want to teach, they can teach. And that is the biggest problem. Again, with the public schooling system, you have the best qualified teachers who are just not taking the effort to even teach, because can't you teach basic literacy and numeracy up to 4th grade if you just keep that as your standard? And this is something I picked up in a conference. Don't aim for 20 chapters in a year. And this standardized system that everyone has to pass at a certain test. Every kid is different. We see that. It is so terrible for me as somebody who has run schools and has seen thousands of kids over the years, that we have to judge them, with this straight line academic system, percentages, the same kind of questions, whereas everyone has their own their own skills and strengths and potentials, and we would like to let them explore that. But within this system, I can't run such a libertarian and novel school that they don't fit into the system later. Eventually they have to come back and do board exams a certain way. They have to crack the system to get out. So we have to keep that in balance. But we do really do a lot of experimenting in our school, where the kids are happy, where we can see that it helps. The bigger picture is what Gabrielle has mentioned, like it is policymakers at the top. I fail to see how the world doesn't recognize that this is the most urgent requirement. Like, all the money going into horrific stuff and your wars and other things, climate change and education, save the world and get your kids ready and give them a good education, get people in policy making who understand what it is. And then it comes down to, at a micro level, it comes down to who are the teachers and what is the society. So there will be gender bias and patriarchy even among the teachers, which we see. So what can you do? The kind of education, you need more training, definitely, for public school teachers. We are a very unique school in that, we're privately funded. It's my family. We run our trust and we run schools. But that's not the case elsewhere, because there are tons of private schools set up in little cities and towns. Again, the great quality of education is not great. So what is going on then with, it's something I need to question. Of course, majority of the kids are in government schools, and that is a big problem. It's such a glaring problem. There are such small fixes that need to come in, which anybody who knows, again, you see whose voices are heard. It's us on the internet with our internet access, and we can talk in our little bubbles about everything so bad and what can we do about it. The masses don't have access to these conversations as well. Like COVID, you mentioned, Gabriella, how technology is such an obstacle for most. Technology, data, the money, sharing of phones during COVID, and the absolute fallacy that kids in the village could afford to be online and take video classes. That was impossible. It did not happen. Our kids today are 2 years behind academically. That is obvious to see. We have been just doing catch up and building skills that they should have got 2 years ago, because online teaching does not work. We tried it on WhatsApp. We tried classes. Doesn't work for most of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I had asked the question to Gabriela as well, and I want to know your inputs on this as well. I mean, personally, when I go back to Kashmir, I remember recently I had an experience wherein one of the kids around me did not score really well in one of his classes, and the elders were somewhere trying to justify, oh, he just had 2 months to study. And I asked the kid, why didn't you study? He said, I just didn't want to online, right? So there was this, so somewhere we are in a fix, right? Not every student is going to adapt to the digital world, and maybe they're just not convinced or they're just not persuaded, right? What were the measures now you're thinking of kind of keeping a plan B for your kids around in the school?
digital does not work for us, right? There are kids, there are
Right.
some parents who still have the old phones they don't have smartphones.
Ah,
They don't
right.
have data to recharge. They don't have money to recharge their phones. They don't have data. And then they have to go to work. So the father takes the phone with him. It's
Correct.
impossible. So luckily, because I'm in a village, it's a small community, we were able to, even during COVID hadn't reached our village, thank God. So we
Yeah.
were, in spite of, we were able to do alternate days. We would split up the kids into batches. We would spread them outdoors. We only face-to-face teaching works here. Online teaching does not work. It
Okay.
absolutely does not work. And forget in the villages. This I have seen in urban, amongst the urban poor as well. Also, listen, the patience that you and I have is because we're used to being online, looking at our phones, reading on our phones, being on laptops. Kids can't do that. Even
Yep.
city kids in my privileged friends' homes, it took them a while, it took them months and months for the kids to be able to sit and say, okay, this is how we learn. So for most of the kids in the world, I would say no. Just sitting down in front and trying to take instruction from a screen, it doesn't happen. Face to
Right.
face really works, and we that was the only fix we had. We called kids in. My teachers stayed on during COVID. Even the volunteers, they did not go home. We had community classes, we had spread out classes, and so our kids are far better than all the other kids in the schools here, because we still kept something up for 2 years. In spite of that, it has been no regular school, no. It's a whole structure in rural schools. You have to teach discipline, you have to teach writing every day, doing your work neatly, which they don't have a backup at home. So for us, and for a lot of people, especially in the Indian subcontinent, digital will not work. It can be a help, and of course we have to prepare our kids for the digital world. So in school, you give them access, you make them type with you, you tell them how to access the internet. They cannot do it on their own at this point, and it
Right.
was it
Right.
was a useless exercise.
So, Sarah, I mean, you just mentioned, I mean, it's a different world when it comes to your part of the world. You know, digital did not work at all. So I cannot really talk about the measures which we can take over there. Um, just with the audience, because I'm sure there are many people watching us. I had once came across one of your posts wherein one of your students had written to J.K. Rowling. Is that true?
Yeah. And she wrote back.
Yeah. So just to give a little bit of more inspiration to the world that how literacy and how your initiative could really change the lives, could you please share that story with us?
Right. So internet doesn't work for the kids for teaching, but it has really helped my school, and it helps us with
Yep.
resources to give the kids. We can bring it to them. So we like Gabriela mentioned, reading is not there is no reading culture in this part of the world. So I took a lot of we took a big initiative. A lot of my teachers think like me, my mother. We built a great library over the years, and we've made the kids slowly grow to love reading, and our kids really like reading. There's a regular uh, you know it's pretty much like a city kid kind of, have you finished the book, I want that. And a massive collection of books that we have. Harry Potter was a big hit, and one of my girls had written a great, they write about it and we ask about it in English literature. And the level standard of English is very good in my school because of the push we keep, and it's just like, okay, I've learned this and I'm going to teach you the same thing. So it's above par. And she had written a lovely essay, a review of a book she had read, or a favorite character of hers. This is Kulsuma Bano a few years ago. And I took a picture and I posted it from the school account. A volunteer of mine did it. And we tagged J.K. Rowling, who liked what she saw. It was a very sweet post. And she wrote back. Of course, J.K. Rowling is since very problematic. So leaving that aside, um, she wrote back, which was amazing. Actually, DM'd me, and she just, of course, keeping it very professional. She said, "Okay, I would like to know more about Kulsum. Can you tell me something about her and how many classmates she had?" And then J.K. Rowling sent a huge gift box for Kulsum and the entire class. A lot of merchandise, Harry Potter merchandise, handwritten letters, and that reached a post office down the mountain. We didn't have roads back then. It
Wow.
reached a couple 2 months prior, and we never knew because the post office failed to tell us that there's a box that's arrived for you. So it was sitting down there, and then J.K. Rowling's team wrote and said, "We had sent something for your school. Did you receive it?" And then I went physically to check. Then we got the box up the mountain, and yeah, so that was a
This
great,
is
a very big
inspirational.
deal.
This is amazing. Really, really amazing. And I'm sure that the way you're connected with the world, you're sharing stories of your students has definitely inspired so many. And I just came across once, it has been few years. I remember the picture wherein everyone was looking into that box, all the kids from the mountains, and it's a beautiful picture. But thank you so much for sharing all the inspirational stuff online. Moving to another part of the subject, let's talk a little about the practicality of literacy and the theoretical part of it, because especially, I mean, I can only talk about South Asia, or the place where I come from. Gabriela, you can definitely put in inputs, wherein the society where I come, huge difference between being illiterate and being an educated. And it has, I feel, it has a lot to do with the interpersonal skills we develop in the society, the way the society is conditioning us as a whole, the way our mindset has been set up. I have seen very highly qualified people, but still talking absolute illogical stuff in terms of the society, or gender discrimination, or women, men. I mean, we all have come across that microaggression in our lives, at work, or maybe in a family. What is your take on that? Who would go first?
Okay, I'll go first. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Another important question. That is such a, I'm so glad you raised that question, because being educated and being literate doesn't necessarily make you a logical person. You'll find that there are a lot of highly educated people out there that say the most absurd things ever, and they are unable to even reason correctly or properly or with logic. And I actually remember having a conversation with a friend of mine. We were discussing increased GBV incidences happening on campuses in South Africa. We've had instances where young women students were being sexually assaulted on campus, and
Sorry to cut you there, Gabriela. Could you please also give the full form of GBV for the audience? Thank you.
Okay, yes. So GBV in its simplest term means gender-based violence. And it's a very major theme in South Africa right now, gender-based violence, because we are seeing increased incidences of young women and girls being killed, being critically and severely abused. And these are incidents that are being perpetuated mostly by men. And we'll find that these incidences are actually happening in spaces of higher learning institutions. And I was discussing this with a friend of mine, and I said, why do you think this is happening? One would think that a male or a man who has access to higher education and information would then be so well informed that they would understand that hurting another human being, or a woman in particular, it's immoral, it's simply wrong. And yet these incidents keep occurring on campuses. And then that's when we actually realize that beyond just having access to higher education, there's another barrier. It's basically, it's culture. Culture plays a very predominant role, and you'll find that males are not willing to give up the privileges that they have in their cultures for the sake of reasoning logically using higher education. So ultimately what I'm saying is that they prioritize the benefits of culture, patriarchal culture, more than what they prioritize higher education. And of course, they have an advantage over us as our male counterparts, because they adhere more to their culture than anything else. And that culture then affords them certain privileges that allows them to perpetuate gender-based violence against women. And another factor about perpetuating gender-based violence is that we need to understand the detail of gender-based violence, GBV particularly, and what constitute gender-based violence, right? Because there's all sorts of abuse that exists. It's not only physical abuse, it's not only sexual abuse. Some of the other forms of abuse that often goes very unnoticed, and I think it's actually one of the most lethal forms of abuse, is psychological abuse and emotional abuse, right? Because with physical abuse, your bruises can heal. But once someone captures your cognitive functions, your mind controls your mind and your emotions, it's very, very, very difficult for them to take greater control over their lives. And that's why it's so important for governments. They need to promote and offer holistic training and capacity building to young women in universities, in local communities, in schools as well, because and these types of programs there needs to be a range of these types of programs that is inclusive of sexual and reproductive rights, that is inclusive of educating people on gender-based violence and what type of behaviors is unacceptable in society, and also developing curriculum that promotes human rights. That is so, so important, human rights, because once you know your rights, you have a certain advantage in understanding what is right and what is wrong and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in society, as well as leadership development programs and trauma-informed mentoring as well, and teaching vulnerable groups to take greater control of their lives, you know. Those types of programs needs to be promoted in society, I believe. And I think that ultimately gender-based violence can be combated if we promote literacy globally, because literacy has benefits. It does have benefits. It has enough benefits to combat gender-based violence. It has benefits to combat wage disparity. It has the ability to also combat climate change issues as well. You know, there's a vast variety of benefits to being literate, and particularly for women and girls, because we are the majority globally. So, you know, we are the ones that need to be at the forefront of these issues. Women needs to be at the forefront of combating issues such as gender-based violence and all other challenges that we face in society. But we can only get that done if we receive the investment that we are due and entitled, because I think we should have to be begging to have access to school. I don't think we should be begging for pens and books. We are entitled to these types of resources merely on the basis that we are human beings and that we exist and our lives matter.
I mean, beautifully put together, Gabriela. Thank you so much. And I think when you mentioned the curriculum should include human rights, I believe that we also need to bring the awareness for each human to understand what is the personal space, and when the person is crossing that space, how are you supposed to react to it? And I think, this is the difference between the first world and the third world countries somewhere, that we are still struggling for the basic electricity, water, education. Whereas when I moved to Europe and I saw women doing exactly what men are doing, I felt that now I'm in the right space. That this is where nobody's going to glorify if a man is in the kitchen, or nobody's going to say, oh my God, when a woman is driving a train, you know? So there are these different corners and parts of the world wherein we see a huge difference in the gender, the surprises which come. When you mentioned gender discrimination, and yes, I think mental attacks are way more damaging than the physical ones. I don't say that I'm not belittling the physical ones, but then I think the mental damage definitely needs more time to heal. And I think we need to create that space for, I would say, the minorities, be it women or any other gender which is there in the society who is suffering. I think it's very important to create that safe space where people can talk about it. Literacy should also be about making people aware of their basic rights, what exactly are human rights. Sabah, in your community, how do you see that discrimination? And is there any difference between the elder generation and the generation which is there in your classes? I cannot hear you,
Yeah,
Sabah.
sorry, I was on mute.
Cannot.
Yeah, I was on mute.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, huge changes coming about with the newer generation. Number one, they have access to more information. uh, in this day and age, everyone does. But also what is actually coming down to them. So I can talk about the kids in my school and how we actively have to break the old chains of patriarchy, misogyny, gender discrimination, gender roles that are cut and dried out, and we do it from a young age, and it works magnificently in children. Anything that you want to bring to children, they really accept it without judgment, like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. Oh, boys and girls can do the same thing, boys and girls can play the same games. Yes, not only can you play the same games, you must play the same games. And everyone, you know it's been slow. There still is a lot of pushback from the homes, because we work with kids 5 or 6 hours a day, and then they go back to their homes where the older systems are there, the older a lot of internalized patriarchy with the women, a lot of patriarchy in general. That's the whole world. There'll be a different kind of gender discrimination in Europe, but it's all over the world. I'll have a problem with my hijab in Paris, for instance, and in Karnataka. So it's all everywhere. But we can make a huge difference through school, touching on literacy and education, right? So literacy is the first step to then become educated, to be able to read more. So yes, give everybody the tools, and then hope for the best. That right now very few people are picking up books and reading them, but at least they know how to read. Eventually it's going to mushroom, and people will start reading more. When you can read, you will read. Hopefully you'll start reading other than WhatsApp fake news and poison. You'll start reading good stuff. You have access to books. Like, the dream is free libraries everywhere, and people throwing money at books. And it's unbelievable how much we have. And all you have to do is give a room, give books, give access to people, and say, these books are yours. Go and explore the world, and I will teach you how to read. And then you go in, and it's your world to discover. This is the dream, right? But it's not happening in reality. So literacy, number one, very, very vital for everyone. It is a right. It's a human right. Nobody can say who can read and who cannot. It was so heartbreaking when the Taliban came back, and as expected, what happened, and they're right next door, and a lot of people agreeing with it, uneducated minds agreeing with it, educated minds agreeing with it, because that's their idea of I don't know. So it's really heartbreaking that this is happening even today. But one step at a time. Literacy, more funds, throw money. If it's not governments doing it, it doesn't seem like governments are going to be doing much of the important stuff. So then we need people to come up and make it a thing that provide. Let's open libraries. That would be a great movement. Open libraries where anybody has access. Free libraries across the world. Come in, start reading, pick up books that you like. No restrictions. I mean, that's the dream.
I think there is so much to talk about that, and I think on humanitarian level, I mean, I am not from the field wherein you guys are contributing at this point, but when I realized that yes, after my hard work or whatever I have studied, now that I'm a little privileged, I can help back. I'm trying my level best to somewhere at least fund those people, go to till the college, and I have literally I'm giving them those greedy points to follow, that what, I'm going to sponsor everything, and somehow trying to encourage the people around me to just go and study. And if we really look at the level of, I mean, the standards which people have across the world, it's just a matter of few hundred or $1,000 which they have to divert to someone's education, and the life can be changed, at least one life, at least two lives, whatever is our potential as a whole. um, yeah, and I'm really requesting everyone who's watching us, please try to make that effort. Please take a leap. Make sure that you're helping someone, even if it's just 1 year's education. That's more than enough. Even if it's just 6 months, but just help that person to dream big, spread their wings, and you never know who has the potential. I think the bigger companies, the international companies, are really coming up with amazing community-based work wherein they're helping underdeveloped, I mean, the people from underdeveloped areas to get the training in probably coding or any other management skill or something, wherein they can further hire them. And I think we need more and more such people at a ground level, wherein we are connected with our soils, and we can really reach out to these people within the society. Um, So probably my last question to both of you, but I really want you guys to take your time and let me know about it. So because you've been in this for a very long time, you're doing your best to, make a change within your community. What will be one message, or what will be one request, or what will be one recommendation from you to the society or whosoever is watching this?
Shall I just go ahead?
Yes, please.
I would say prioritize education, and that is not book learning. Let your kids' minds be opened. I'm focusing on kids. I've kind of given up on grown-ups. I have literally given up. Like, it's I just in the work that I have done, it's very difficult to change someone older's mind. I can see brilliant and beautiful results with the younger generation. I'll be so generous as to go into the late teens, and then beyond that point, but that's a lot of work to do. Please don't restrict your kids in learning. Everything that they learn is great. Don't push your prejudices down their minds, but that's a tough ask. I would just say let kids read, let kids read, and as communities, as people who have access to internet, a little money saved up, see what you can just around you, look around you, educate someone or provide for education. There are tons of organizations, or government schools is fine. It's better than no education. Just push kids into learn and see what you can do that they stay through the school system and graduate, and that's it. Just really focus on it. It makes an absolute world of difference to their whole family and to their life. So it's not something that is just talk. It works. So please stick with education and help kids get educated.
Thank you so much, Sama. That was beautiful. Gabriela?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I think that in as much as most of the responsibility lies with government to invest in education and to take up that leadership role in ensuring that its society is capable and equipped and literate. I think on an individual level, if you really genuinely want to make a difference in someone's life, very simple, donate books to local classrooms. If you have books that you're not utilizing, or that's just there, and donate those books to a classroom, surely there would be some child that find that information and that material very helpful, and they would appreciate it. I would also advise to gift people books for their birthday. Doesn't necessarily have to be a significant day as a birthday. It can be any other occasion, but gift people books as an exchange and in a form of promoting human development, as a form of handing over a piece of material that says, look, read this, it will empower you. It can be a spiritual book, it can be a holy book, it can be a novel, it can be any kind of book, but just like gift a book. And lastly, I would say start a community library, even if it's from scratch, doesn't matter. Get people, businesses, get schools to donate books, and you can even create some type of system whereby community members are able to borrow the books so that others are also able to access that book as well. But yeah, definitely the book, start a library and donate books to local classrooms. And lastly, parents. Parents play a very, very pivotal role in their children's development. Sit with your child, help your kid with schoolwork, with homework. And if you're unable to do so, try to seek a volunteering tutor, because I know tutoring services can be quite costly, and costs has always been a barrier in accessing quality education. But seek help. There's always help available, and it starts off just with a plain page and a pen. That's how I started developing love and respect for academia, was through the fact that I had a parent that was a school teacher, and I was always exposed to pencils and pens and drawing, and I was able to get my creativity on at home in that space. So give the kid painting brushes, painting material, those small, it starts there, and you'll find that it may sound like it's insignificant, but the impact that I have on that child is so significant, because you're literally equipping and preparing that child to take on bigger responsibilities, to access higher education, to get admissions to a university, and that type of thing. And that child will then also further make a contribution back to society. So starting off by donating a book can actually have a very long-lasting investment in the future, not only for the individual, but the impact that that particular individual will make in society on a global scale as well. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Gabriela. Yes, we have so many ways wherein we can actually contribute to the community and actually encourage the youngsters. Sabha is somewhere right that it's a little less hopeful when it comes to the adults because they're just concrete brains and we cannot really change them. But when she mentioned that right from the beginning, right from the early stage of a kid, when her school is trying to inculcate those things which are supposed to be natural and normal and not glorified, I think that's where the normalcy comes in. And in future, they will be, I would say, less shocked to the more developed part of the world. They would not be how exactly did this really happen? This doesn't happen back home, right? So thank you so much. Thank you both of you for incredible insights, for all your inspirational stories and your experiences. We really, really need leaders like you who are helping us get educated on such things, helping us get vis-a-vis with all the problems with these smaller areas or the underdeveloped places are really facing. That really reminds us how privileged are we, or how important is it to work hard, get educated, spread the wings and just fly. It's extremely, extremely important. And I think you people and your associations are really helping us to keep those inspirational stories alive. So thank you so much. It was wonderful chatting with you both. And for all the audience, please feel free to connect with the ANTS production for any recommendations if you have in future, any feedbacks if you have for the session. If you want to connect with Gabriela or Sabad, they are available on Instagram and Twitter. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, yes, yes.
Awesome. And you can definitely donate to their organizations as well. For now, we will be signing off. And thank you, everyone, for watching the show. And we will be back with another live stream session on another very interesting topic very soon. Thank you so much and have a good evening.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.